Gabe, let's start with a real basic question. Like, who are you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Ruben. And I'm happy to tell you a little bit more about myself. So I was raised in a family of three boys. Had a parent that my father immigrated from Argentina. My mother came from, her father was a Holocaust survivor. Both of them had to really work hard to get to where they got to as both as doctors and really give me and my brothers a life they never had when they were younger. That ethic's been instilled in me. And now I have four children, three boys and a girl. Actually, my little daughter turns one today. And, my family is everything. So although I've had a pretty successful and interesting career. I'm a family first man. Also, a little bit about me before that, I grew up as an athlete, was a collegiate baseball player, and I feel that's a big part of who I am today in the workplace. So huge baseball and sports fan, and I'm just happy to be with you today. Appreciate you having me.
No, it's super appreciated. I know we're in for a lot of courageous decisions, and we're going to dive in. I want to start with the baseball one. I think it's super interesting. First of all, happy birthday to your daughter. That's super cool. Let's start with the baseball one, because that is you chasing a dream, right? I mean, that's you chasing a dream and negotiating with yourself, I'm assuming, on multiple levels. Do I keep going? Do I not keep going? Just give us some insight in that, because those were some very formative years when you were on the field.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you always have so much wisdom now looking back compared to when I'm in the moment. If you asked me what I was going to be when I grew up, probably till the age of 21, I would have said professional baseball player. That's what I'm going to do. Now, my father instilled in me the importance of education. So I always knew that I was going to, be going to school no matter what, And so with baseball, when I was a freshman in college is when I experienced some of my first injuries. And that's where you're young, you still think you can do it. And I just plowed through a bunch of injuries, abusing my body, going all the way through school, and when I was starting to get through school, right, you start to have those realizations of maybe I'm not going to make it, or maybe it's not the right decision. You get injured a few times, you have friends that make the major leagues. And I remember that moment sort of going into my senior year of college where, I finally found what I liked to study, which was supply chain. It was probably not until my senior year of college. I was a marketing major, but then I took an operations class, read the book, The Goal, which was a great book.
That's a great book.
Sort of got me into the operations and supply chain world. Had the woman I knew I wanted to marry. She was my girlfriend doing long distance from New York to San Francisco. So that's when I made the decision of, I'm not going to probably chase this dream any longer. I'm going to go to grad school. And I went to grad school knowing that if I stopped school, I probably wouldn't go back. So then I got my MBA in supply chain. And it was definitely a tough decision, because to have that realization of, I might not be good enough, or maybe my body has taken its toll and I need to actually prepare myself for the future in this family that I can't even think of yet because I'm still a young kid. So it was a hard decision. Looking back, it was the right decision, because I have a lot of friends who tried it, didn't make it, and were who am I now? What do I do now at 26, 27?
Identity. That's right.
The identity changes. So it was definitely a tough decision. One of the probably few right decisions I made when I was in my late teenage, early 20 years was sort of shifting towards education and finding a career.
I mean, was there like a burning bush moment where you knew, like there was one moment where you knew, oh, it's over, or was it dripped? Did it kind of come to you in stages? And when you made that decision, was there any grief involved? I mean, was there any, like, I had to grieve this dream or process through that this is not going to happen?
Yeah, I think, I remember getting to my first year of college and stepping on the field and going from the big fish in the small pond to the small fish in the big pond. And, when you're 18, you're playing with 22-year-olds. That's a very big difference.
Yeah.
You're seeing these basically grown men that throw harder than you, hit farther than you, run faster than you. So it was a little bit of an aha moment, but I was still too young and naive. It was like, okay, I just got to work harder. And I think that the decision really started to come when you're starting to say, okay, I'm going to graduate. Do I apply for grad school? Do I start applying for jobs? That was the time when it's like, okay, this is real. I have to make a decision. I think I wouldn't say it was a huge grieving process, because over time, I've had 10 surgeries since between playing and stop playing. So it was gradual, where it's like, you have a surgery, you get injured, you come back, you might be a little less in this area, a little more in this area. But I think it was when I had to sort of make a decision that life's about to hit me, right? I can either sit on a bus and eat tuna and try to play baseball. I can go try to get a job, or I can go get my grad school degree. And I think, understanding that I had my sort of future partner laid out, I knew what I wanted to do. That sort of played into it for me as well. I'd say the grieving process, to this day, I still miss it. I lived through my kids like any dad. But I would say it was gradual for me. So when it happened, it wasn't such a drastic change for me. It wasn't like I tried it and failed. I gave everything I had. I left it all out on the field to the point where I'm still achy when I wake up in the morning.
Oh, okay. Right. So it's still some physical,
Oh yeah. But nothing too bad that I can't keep push on.
Yeah. I know. I get it. I think it's an interesting time though, because you have a girlfriend who's now your wife. And so were you guys navigating this decision together? Was this one of your first decisions you guys were kind of navigating a little bit together or getting input on?
She let me, of course, you get input on it, but she definitely let me, she was going to support me no matter which direction I went. But, definitely you get support from it and guidance. But she supported me when I made the decision to go all the way across to New York while she was still in school in California, right? She supported that because she knew what dream I was chasing. So she was always there to support me and still is.
So you come out with, and I love the fact that you were so clear on what you wanted to do, because you've had a lot of success in your career, supply chain, logistics, super relevant today, right? It's in the news all the time these days. Was that a sense of, was that clarity, a sense of energy for you, having that sense of confidence? I know I found my passion. I know what I want to focus on. And how did that show?
I think I remember taking that class. I can't remember the professor's name, but I remember taking that class, and it's like, to anybody watching who might be younger, you think you have to know what you want to do when you're 18, 19, 20. I knew I wanted to be in business, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do until it clicked for me. And when it clicked for me, it definitely, because I actually wasn't a huge fan of school myself. I knew it was necessary, but I didn't like school. So going into my MBA, it definitely was, that sort of invigorated me to, okay, there's an area I like, and for me, it was just this big, it started with procurement and supply chain. And I looked at it like, this is a big thing. It's a real area people always need improvement on. It's never going to go away, right? And it sort of just intrigued me at the time as, we're marketing for me, which is, and now that I understand it much better being in the professional world, it wasn't giving me that sort of clear, it didn't click for me. So I was doing the marketing degree, but because that's what I was doing. Yeah. So, it didn't click for me my senior year, but it definitely gave me a lot of confidence and energy and more curiosity, like a little bit of more of a appetite for school. When I'm like, oh, I like this. I want to learn more about this.
Yeah, and so you come out in the real world, and you worked consulting. You worked a couple of, because I know we're going to talk about this rocket ship that you joined, right? That was a big decision. Give us your first couple of years out. What was that like, and lead us into the next big decision.
Yeah, and it's it was interesting. I met a gentleman who was one of the founders of the company I first joined. And he said, look, he wasn't there anymore, but he said, you should join company like this for a couple of years, then you should go to a startup. I didn't think anything much of what he said, but what happened was I joined that company, had some success, and then a startup came knocking at my door. Now, at the time that startup where I work today, when they came knocking at my door, my wife we were about to have our first child. This is about 3 or 4 years outside of my MBA, and I knew it was the right decision at the time. So, made the jump. And I still remember my wife going to the website, watching people shoot each other with Nerf guns in the recruiting video, saying, I'm about to have our first kid. Like, you're going to leave a 401k, you're going to leave a really good company to go for this. And I knew it was the right decision. So it definitely was a risky, big decision for us to leave. I was still young, but it was an unknown, right? The office was tiny. CEO still had a cubicle the time I started working. So, I'm sitting there, my wife gave birth to our child 3 weeks after I started this new role. Wow. So for her, she's like, you're doing so well. But again, she trusted, right, my decision and supported my decision. So that was a big decision at the time that I actually got a lot of flack from my current company and some of my current colleagues of, why are you doing that? But it's turned out okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. You've come now as thousands of employees and so forth. How did you know? You mentioned that you just knew. Is intuition for you a data set? Like, how did you? It's going to be like.
I think there's multiple levels of that for me, right? So first, the thing that I was looking for if I was going to leave was opportunity, right? Okay. I set a goal to be a VP by the time I was 30. again, now that I'm older, I realize that title's not as important as I once thought it was. But I had this goal, and I was in a more traditional company that no matter how quickly I excelled, I was more on a traditional step stool consulting ladder, right? Where you were a consultant and then a senior consultant and a manager. So this company was giving me an opportunity and sort of a blank slate. That was a big one for me. Intuition is a big part of, that gut feel for me. I'm also, faith is a big part of it for me. So that definitely played into every major decision I had was my faith and my prayer. But I think it was a combination of all those things that led me to get there. But for me, because my current company had offered me more money to stay, and offered to change my title, but it wasn't about that. What this other company was going to offer me was this opportunity to prove myself and become something that I couldn't in a larger company because of the ceilings that they had, right? Because of the infrastructure they had in place. And it was an opportunity to learn in a setting that was, again, somewhat undefined, right? When you join a company with 20 or 30 people, the company is literally being molded as you go. One day it could be, look like this. The other day it could expand a little bit more. One day, I started in post sales and I covered a demo and they said, you're now in pre-sales, like literally overnight. They just saw me do a demo, that kind of thing. And that's actually what propelled me into the sales, which I'm very, very grateful that that company gave me that opportunity. And then I had a leader that saw where my skill set should be and helped get me there. I didn't know of pre-sales very much at all because I had spent my whole career to that point implementing solutions, not selling solutions. That opportunity wouldn't have happened at a larger company where, I cover for somebody and then all of a sudden they give me a huge career shift.
Are you the kind of person who's comfortable with the unknown? Is that something that you're like, I don't have to have it all figured out. I'm just like, okay, this feels right. Best next step is let's go. Well,
again, I think for me, right, there's never a fully unknown because of my faith. I rely on that. But I do think that, and I was just talking about this with someone yesterday, every time you go into a new role, if you are a person, so I never understood why a person could sit as a salesperson or a developer and be content in that setting their whole career. And I always came with this ambitious, I want to be a CEO. And I never understood why people wouldn't want to be a CEO. I can understand now being in processes like the IPO process and watching what a CEO goes through to go from a small company, taking a company public, but I couldn't understand it at the time. Right. So for me, I had this drive to, and everybody goes to the unknown. If you're a salesperson and then you become a regional vice president. The first time it's an unknown.
That's right.
You're this and, so every step in your career, you're being presented with skill sets you might be capable and qualified for, but probably things you haven't done. So that's where I could see how somebody is comfortable selling, making money selling, and they don't want that unknown or they don't want that extra responsibility because of where they're comfortable and what they want to do. I couldn't see that when I was younger. When I was younger, it was just, I want to get as high as I can as fast as possible. And now that I've had the privilege of sort of climbing up the ladder of titles and different rankings and companies, I can understand why certain people do certain things. So the unknown is a must if you're going to, the unknown's a must in life. Right.
Yeah.
Where you go.
No choice. Right.
You have no choice. So I think I'm okay with it. Right. I think the reason I've been successful in the unknown outside of some of the personal things I've spoken about is I've always had great leaders around me. I've always had people that wanted me to stretch and would support me if I failed and support me, when I was successful, and that would tell me when I was doing something good, but also tell me when I needed to improve. And I think in order to go into the unknown, you have to be very coachable and you have to be able to take that level of feedback.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because one of the themes that's come up for us when you join a rocket ship, like you've joined, you go from 30 people to close to 3,000, more than 3,000. It's a massive amount of growth, right? How did that change you as a person? I love when you're going with this feedback because I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, that just some parts of you had to change if you wanted to keep growing. There was no choice, right? Like this is a bad habit or I need to embrace this. Was that hard at times on a personal level? The company's growing like a rocket ship. You have to grow with it. Tell me a little bit about maybe that dynamic there.
Yeah, I think there definitely are some moments where it was harder than others for sure. To be clear, I'm still having to change. I still have some huge weaknesses that I'm very well aware of and I have a hard time changing. But I think, when you look at that, as I saw my company go from 100 to 500 to 1,000, you see the people that don't make the turn, and then you see the people that make the turn. And a lot of people that don't, some people are good at a 200-person company, but they're not as good at a 1,000-person company. Different things are required, different skill sets are required. And that's not a negative thing to the person, right? But you have to, one, desire it, and two, be able to adapt to the change. So there definitely been, I think one of the biggest moments for me, and I don't remember the exact date. I remember sitting with my CEO in his office, who's been a great mentor to me, and talking about empathy. And I think for me, right, when you are a type A personality that's always focused on executing, there can be a lot of collateral damage in that. And that can actually hurt your career. And there's still points where that hurts me, right? Where I don't realize that the way that I'm acting or the way that I'm executing could have a negative impact, right? Or, somebody may wanted to be part of something and I didn't let them because I was so focused on the goal. So for me, empathy and understanding everybody in the room, trying to be in their shoes, when you're selling, who am I selling to? Oh, that person's been burnt before when they bought software. So I have to understand where they're coming from, right? That person's always been the person that's quiet on the Zoom. I have to figure out how to make them feel a part of it. So empathy has been that was a big turning point for me.
Okay.
Because one of the biggest decisions I ever made was to move to Asia, right? I got asked to go to Singapore. And at the time, although I have 4 kids now, at the time it was me, my wife, and I think it was 7, 5, and 2 were my boys at the time. So it was a big decision. But I was going into a world, I would talk about unknown, right? I went directly to a sales manager without being a direct salesperson. Even though I'd been involved in thousands of sales cycles, I was going to a country that I'd been to before and sold to before, but really didn't understand. And a continent where, it's more like Europe, right? Where it's not like you're going from California to Nevada, but when you go from one country to another country.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Right. That was a big, big change for me. And I think having empathy and surrounding myself with the right people was the only reason that I had success in that change.
When you found empathy for others, did that trigger some empathy for yourself?
I don't know if it was empathy for myself. I think the empathy for others always seems to expose where I need to improve or where I lack or where I need to, make pivots or adjustments, right? I don't think I never look at myself and say, how do I feel in this moment? Or how do I, what's my position? I always look at, okay, who am I interacting with, and what's that situation, sit in their shoes. And again, I think empathy is hard because it makes you look in the mirror a lot of times and it exposes where your lack is, right? And I think if you talk to any leader, they've had those realizations over time of where their lack is and trying to improve their lack over time in order to, build better teams and be a better leader.
Do you improve your lack? I mean, obviously. Do you also supplement it sometimes? You're like, look, I'm only going to get a 5% improvement here, but I can bring somebody in on my team who can get a 400% improvement.
100%. I mean, I remember when I first took on the Asia role, right? So, we were asked about the role. I told the chief revenue officer at the time that it was a great career opportunity. And me and my wife had to talk about it and pray about it and, talk to the kids about it and really understand it's a bigger move than I'm taking a job and it looks good on my resume. So after we, did all those things and we got confirmation that we knew we were supposed to go, what you don't show to everybody when the announcement goes out to the company and everybody congratulates you is I'm scared, right? I'm going into this.
Yeah.
And you start to think I'm not qualified, right? Because it's like, although I've been part of so much of the success in selling in that time, this was such an unknown, right? It's like, okay, here's a continent, right? And, so it was for me, right? In terms of, I knew right away that the only way I was going to be successful was to surround myself with people that could make me successful, right? So, my first hire was a pivotal hire in my success there because I didn't look at them as a salesperson. I looked at them as, okay, tell me about this country. Tell me what I don't know. How do you interact with people? Because, in Asia, every single country has different cultures, different heritage, different religions, different demeanors and how they handle themselves, right? Every single culture. And I definitely made some mistakes. And I was even told later that a lot of people thought I would fail as an American bull in a China shop. But the reason I don't think I did fail, outside of some of the personal reasons, was I surrounded myself with people that would give me feedback. I surrounded myself with people that were smarter than me and had a lot of skill sets and experience in different ways that, I didn't have, right? I got people that were selling for years and I would give them the opportunity to do things that maybe were beyond their traditional role and that's where I would learn from them, right? I would be able to replicate some of those things myself. And like you said, no one is amazing at everything. All great leaders realize where their strengths and weaknesses are and supplement their weaknesses, not only personally with education and great mentors, but with people, right?
Yeah.
And there's some things that I'm not as good at and I will always need help with, right? And that is what it is. And if you don't come to that realization, I think that's the biggest thing is as you become a leader and you make all of these changes, that self-reflection really puts you at a crossroads each time of, am I willing to do this, right? Or am I going to take this feedback and stay where I am or shrivel back up or whatever that may be?
Yeah, what I'm also hearing is like, if there's a theme, like stay humble, stay hungry. It's like they're kind of, to people that make those big turns, they stay humble and hungry.
I mean, hustle I think is everything, right? I think no matter what job you're in, whether you're in a big company, I used to have something written on the bottom of my baseball hat when I played that said, don't ever be satisfied. It's that, story of Michael Jordan working in the gym, late at night because somebody else was working harder than him. Right. So I always had that take on things. There's going to be someone better, smarter, working harder than me. And I do think there's a huge difference between being confident and being arrogant, right? And being assertive and being arrogant. I think, as I was younger, like most teenagers and younger people are, you think you're much bigger and wiser and better and you're more than you are. And then the real world hits you and you have to have a realization about that. So I do think, being confident but humble and always being hungry are really, really important.
Is arrogant, is that like I would think of arrogant, a definition would be like, I'm always right. Is that?
I think that can be one definition, but I think it's more also of thinking you're better than you actually are, or displaying confidence in a way that's detrimental to others, right? Being confident in how you make a decision is different than bragging or boasting, right? I don't really believe in bragging and boasting. I tell my kids that all the time, which is hard because, they watch all these football players do these crazy dances. And I try to tell them, well, they're an entertainer. So it's part of their job, right? Is to do that. But, it's hard to tell a 7-year-old, like, you scored a touchdown, but you shouldn't rub it in the other team's face when the world's sort of showing that, right? So I definitely think it's not about always being right, but I do think on the flip side of that, when you're humble, you have to understand when you may be wrong. And I think that's been a big change in my career where you don't think you're wrong all the time, when you have a lot of success, and you have to be able to understand when you're wrong.
Asia seemed to be this like rite of passage of this very powerful experience for you. Is that true? Like your business, like, and what is that, am I reading that right? Am I sensing that? Like Asia was really transformative.
Oh, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, you see, I have good results from Asia that you can see on my LinkedIn or, I don't have a resume with my LinkedIn. You see the Facebook pictures and the personal side of all the beautiful places you see in Asia, but it was one of the hardest times in our lives, right? Because we moved over there and it was a complete culture shock for my family. Culture shock for some of my children, right? That weren't really, they didn't really fit into the way schooling and things were done there, and the way that we were raised versus the way that, children are there. And it was a big, hard time for us. And quite frankly, we knew we were supposed to be there. So that's why we stuck it out through the first 6 to 8 months of just very, very difficult time. But it's hard to be going to work, right? I remember being in Australia for our big user conference and literally getting a call from my wife about some challenges we were having with one of our kids at the school, and literally getting on a plane and missing the rest of the conference. But, I had support. My CRO always said, your family's first, the job second. And, it was a big adjustment for us. It was a big adjustment for one of my children who ended up thriving there. But the first 6 months are hard, and you're there to do this job, right? And the company's spending a lot of money to make, on all these expenses and things, and they moved you over there and the expectations there, and you're there to do this job, and you're fighting through all of these things, which made us, quite frankly, a very resilient family being there. Because the change, when the going gets tough is really when you start to realize, where your resilience level is, which I think we've all experienced in the last couple of years in some way, shape, or form. But that was tough for us, even though it might have looked shiny on a Facebook or a LinkedIn, right? It was a big personal shift and change for us as a family. But at the end of the day, it made us stronger.
It made you stronger. So when you came back to the US, your leadership capacity was probably so much greater, right? I'm assuming. I mean, your ability to take on new projects and new roles successfully, I would imagine the confidence and the business acumen you now have, it was a game changer.
Yeah, I think for me now, I'm at a point where I do feel I can take on anything. The question is, do I want to take it on? Right. For me, that always goes back to passion and desire, right? What problem am I trying to solve? How important is that problem? What does the product look like, the team? I mean, I'm still at the same company because a lot of those things are in place in a very good way. But, it definitely gives me a little bit more confidence than I had before on taking on something unexpected, both in professional life, but also in personal life, right? In our family life, right? We feel we can pretty much, after everything we've gone through in the last few years, we think, we can go.
Sky's the limit.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, that's a great, living life with confidence is such a great blessing, right? I mean, because you can see opportunities and you got resilience. Yeah. Final question for you. This wisdom for people making courageous decisions, right? I mean, we've got a war in Europe. We've got, turbulence. We've got inflation. It's a lot of things that are grinding on people these days. People are being forced to make more courageous decisions left, right, and center. What final words of wisdom do you have for people making courageous decisions right now and to thrive in this very unknown environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big question. And I don't think that I have an answer that is right or would fit everyone. I think for me, right, I've been fortunate to have my faith and my family be big parts of every decision. I think I'd be in a very different place without those two things. I think when you look at the world right now and you look at markets, turbulence, you look at everything that's happened between what's happening right now with the conflict all the way back to the last 2 years. There's no one that has a crystal ball. There's no one that, no one person on this earth that can really, here's where you put your money to be safe, or here's the company you work at to be safe. Right. Everybody's been faced with decisions. I think you just got to find the purpose that you're working for and living for, right? Both personally and professionally, right? And for everybody that's different. Some people that's faith. Some people that's, what they're shooting for as a goal in life. But I think, for me, right, I think the biggest thing is you can't be afraid of change. And I think, a lot of what you may be looking for actually will come in that change. So I think the biggest advice I'd give to people is, if you're looking for something and you haven't found it, the odds are it might not be where you're looking, right? And, and where you're looking and where you may find it could be in a change. And that change could be a million different answers, from professional or personal answers. But, it's the answer could be in the change. The answer could be in something that is uncomfortable. The answer could be in something that is unknown. But if you keep looking in the same place and not finding it, I think that's the question you got to ask yourself.
So it's what I'm hearing saying, like, stay radically open-minded.
Yeah, I think it's open-minded, but I think it's also, as humans, we are resistant to change. We grasp towards comfort and familiarity, right? And when you're not, so it's not just radically open-minded, it's just as open-minded as it may be different than the box you live in today. Yeah. It may be that you need, a new role at your company. It may need that you need to have a hard conversation with your manager where you're very, open about where you're at, where you want to be, and what may not be getting you there, right? Not everybody has a manager they feel comfortable with. So it might be someone like HR that you talk to. It could be in your personal life where people are moving across the world. I mean, people are moving all over the place. Yeah. We've seen more change in the last 2 years, both professionally, personally, economically, than I've probably experienced in my lifetime. I mean, I know there's been other big events. So I think it's you just got to ask yourself the question, what am I avoiding where the change might have the answer? Because we tend to avoid that change sometimes where the answer may be behind in the change.
I think the question I got told once was to ask myself was, what am I pretending not to know? That's a hard one. That's when you get brutally honest with yourself.
Yeah, and it's tough. It definitely is tough when you know the answer might be somewhere, but it's somewhere you don't want to go, or something you don't want to do, or, a question you don't want to ask because the answer may be tough, right? But that's where I've seen people in all walks of life, whether it's personal life, family life, professional life. That's where I've seen a lot of the biggest changes, where they go into a place and put trust in something, someone, right, that may be different than they have before.